My guest today is Dr. Shefali. For those of you who don't know Dr. Shefali, she's been endorsed by Oprah, of course, and by her for her revolutionary idea on conscious parenting. She is a clinical psychologist, speaker, and author. This is the book that I had. Sorry, I'm going to show it a little bit better there. It's called The Parenting Map. It's a step by step solution to consciously create the ultimate parent child relationship. Thank you so much first of all, thank you so much for saying yes to this because I know that you're so extremely busy from conferences to, your online work and content to in person. Let's jump straight to it. I had so many questions for you, but I'm going to start off with what made you decide to kind of create this book and this movement on conscious parenting. Tell us your journey of how you started this movement.
I became a mother and I was part of the problem. And I saw myself acting like a lunatic. And when I
Okay.
when I saw my own crazy, I realized, I need to dig deeper. But no one was really talking about conscious parenting back then.
Yeah.
And so I had to, almost pioneer this movement to become a better parent myself. So all of this is really because I was trying to become a better parent and then realizing that my clients need help, my parent clients need help, and the children need help. And so all of this has come out of that inspiration.
For the audience who doesn't know exactly what conscious parenting is, could you tell us in your own words what is conscious parenting and what sets it apart from traditional parenting?
So, conscious parenting is different from traditional parenting. What is traditional parenting? Traditional parenting is how you and I were probably raised, where we were told how to be the perfect child. We were treated as children to be seen, not heard. We were made to comply, to follow, to be obedient. A lot of fear, a lot of shame, a lot of punishment, a lot of yelling, like traditional hierarchy.
Okay.
And conscious parenting goes against that. It really asks the parent to raise themselves, to look at their own crap, and then when the parent heals themselves, they can then be better parents for their children.
In your book, The Parenting Map, you gave a lot of examples of parents projecting what they wanted for themselves on their children. And I guess it relates to what you're saying, how we need to parent ourselves because this is, we are passing generational trauma that we've experienced to our children. So one example you gave was like, I think a mother who was like forcing her child to do piano or something like that. And then in the end, it was because she wanted her child to be recognized as like a very important musician. My key takeaway there was like, this is your dream and this is what your parent was wanting you to have and you never achieved it and now you're passing it on to your children. Is that a common theme in parenting? Like generational trauma that we imprint consciously or subconsciously to our children?
Absolutely. We're doing it all the time and we're not aware of it. First, we are the legacies of our parents doing this to us, right? So we are living our parents' unconscious legacy. Now, we are not even aware how these legacies play out in our lives, how we are living a pattern. And then we are unconsciously pass it on to our children. So this is the way it is. And until we wake up and begin to live more consciously, we will keep passing down this unconscious baggage. And that's what my book, The Parenting Map, teaches parents to
Yep.
do, to break the patterns, to break the dysfunctional cycles so that they can create healthier patterns for the future generations.
In the book, you talk about the different types of inner child, the different types of parents, sorry, and the different types of children, whether it's like anxiously attached or whether it's, the freezer or whether it's, how did you come up with these like, um, what prototype, or what's the word? It's kind of like a pillar or a box on where you put people. Because I was resonating with a few. I was like, oh, this is me. And then I'd read another one and be like, oh, this is also me. Um, is it from the the studies you've been doing on psychology, or is it because you've had a lot of patients and you just had a lot of experience and you crafted the different types of parenting?
I based it on the flight fight response.
Yes.
when we are in survival. So I have the fighter parent, the fixer
Yes, yeah.
parent, the feigner, the freezer, and the
Yeah.
fleer. Many of us are freezers, many of us are fixers, many of us are fighters. So you can begin to at least understand your patterns, because if you're not aware, how are you going to ever change, right? First, you have to become aware. Oh my goodness, I'm doing it right now. I'm fixing, so I'm a fixer. What are you?
Yeah. I am a mix. I would say I'm definitely a fixer. Um, I grew up with a parent who was a little bit of a fighter. So when I was reading, I was like, oh, but this might be my mom. And I try to problem solve all the time. And you're right. Sometimes we need to let the children kind of just like leave them alone and let them handle it for themselves. Because in the book, you give symptoms and you give like this is what could potentially happen to a parent who focuses on their child and their fixer, a helicopter mom who does this. The child ends up becoming, let's say, they don't trust their own decisions, or they're indecisive, they're withdrawn. And there are so many things that, to be honest, scary when I read it, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want my child to become like this or to become like that. Could you tell us, when it comes to conscious parenting, how could this positively affect a child's emotional development?
Yeah, so when we impose our ways on our children, we stop them from tapping into their own inner knowing and their own inner knowledge. And then they get disconnected from their authentic self. So when we are aware of our patterns, like I teach in the book, The Parenting
Yeah.
Map, and we then don't impose these patterns on our children, we give them the space and the opportunity to tap into themselves, to look within themselves, and to begin to create that inner connection. Most of us are so disconnected from ourselves, and that is most of our problems in life, is because we're not aware of who it is we are, how it is we are, who we are. And so all of that can take place in childhood, either for the good or the bad. And we as parents need to be aware. Look, we're all going to pass down some amount of dysfunction,
Yeah.
but the degree of dysfunction depends on how aware or unaware we are.
How do we make parents aware?
First, the parent has to realize there is a problem. So when they realize it's a problem and they come to look for help, then we gently show them the pattern. Look, every time you do this, your kid does this. And then, like I teach in the book, I show the parent how it's a pattern from their childhood. And once they see that, yeah, my mother used to always judge me, and now I'm judging my child, then they begin to see, oh, okay, it's not coming from me because I'm a bad person. It's coming from me because this has been my pattern. And I think parents get defensive and they're resistant because they think that they need to be perfect. And I teach parents that you don't need to be perfect. You're never going to be perfect. This is all about awakening and becoming more and more conscious.
Awakening.
So part of becoming conscious is being unconscious, right?
Yeah.
So it's okay to be unconscious, but let's use that opportunity to become more aware and more conscious.
There's so many words that you mentioned that are very striking. Like it's an awakening. It's about being unconscious to shifting it to being conscious. What are some common challenges that parents may face when they're transitioning from traditional parenting or what they're used to and the pattern, and shifting it all the way to conscious parenting?
The parent may experience a lot of uncertainty and guilt because they've been so used to being the
Yeah.
boss that they think that they are being bad parents when they give the child control and power. They don't realize that giving control and power to the child is actually the best thing that they can do for their child. They think they're being bad parents. And then also they may get a lot of resistance from their family members, like, oh, now you become so weak,
It's
and
true.
look at you, you're so, you're so spineless, you're a pushover.
You have no discipline.
And so it's very hard. Yeah, what happened to the discipline? You have no control, right? And because main culture is based on traditional parenting, so when you change it, then you make all the traditional parents are very upset because you're saying that you don't like their way, and they don't like to be judged. So in order to change to a conscious parent, you need to be very, very brave and bold.
Yeah.
and you need to take a risk. And it's possible. And the best thing is once you begin to do it, and in my book, I give 20 steps. And if you follow those steps, I give so many exercises. I made it so easy. If you follow the steps, then you will immediately begin to see changes in your child. And it's going to make you feel so
Yeah.
amazing that you will want to keep doing it.
When you talk about how in our culture, in our families, people say, you're not disciplined, you have no boundaries between your child. Even more in Asian culture, where it's like the parent is here and the child is subservient. You listen, and that's how you honor and respect your parents, and that's how it's always been. Otherwise, you bring shame to the family, and it's a very, what's the term where it's like the parents are the boss and the children just have to obey and follow. And I hear this all the time, even from my peers who are more progressive. It's like, where is the discipline in your parenting? There's no structure. Because I try to be mindful and I try to be conscious. I'll give you one example. When my son is climbing something that is not so safe, instead of getting mad at him and screaming at him and telling him to get down or telling him to be careful, I really try to ask him and assess and say, I'll say, are you being safe? What is your body telling you? Do you think that's okay? People laugh at me because they're like, you're just going to wait for him to fall and hurt himself. Or they're like, that's not how to take care of a child, right? And I never know what to say because I always feel kind of shy to impose my belief on them. But if it were you, how would you explain it, or how would you, I don't know if it's defend it to other parents who are very resistant of giving children the autonomy or giving children the power?
So good what you're doing. Even if you ultimately do bring your child down, you're not just running and racing to stop him. You're trying to see, right? And that's because you can tolerate your anxiety, and because you truly believe that he needs to figure out his own limits. So it's such a great thing you're doing. I would just tell parents, I understand, don't worry, you're just anxious. I'm not such an anxious
Okay.
parent. Or I'm trying to get my child to tune into his
Yes, yeah.
body. It's okay. You do you, I do me. You can just make a joke out of it. And it's really because they are so anxious that they jump in.
One thing that struck me in the parenting map is over parenting. And I'm guilty of this because I feel I need to be like, fully present and I need to like almost too much. So when you share over parenting, I actually asked on my Instagram, like, do people know what over parenting is? And people gave their answers. It's like when you're a helicopter parent, when you micromanage, when you're too involved. Can you talk a little bit about what why overparenting happens?
Overparenting happens when the parent is very anxious and doesn't know how to manage their anxiety. So then they put the tentacles of control on their children. They want to know every detail of their children, and they want to micromanage every situation, not because they're coming from love and care. It's because they're terrified that if something goes wrong, they won't be able to manage the anxiety. They won't be able to tolerate the anxiety that it brings up. It's like if you're walking with your child and they're walking behind you, and say they're 7 years old, they're capable of walking behind you, but you keep turning around and going, are you okay? Are you
Yeah.
okay? You sure you're
Yeah.
okay? Then the child is like, yeah, maybe I need to feel more anxious while she keep checking on me,
Yeah.
right? Now you're introducing fear and
That's
anxiety,
true.
as opposed to you're fine, it's fine, we will be fine, right? What is the energy you're passing down to your
Oh,
children?
wow.
And you always want to pass the energy of it's fine, it'll be
Yeah.
okay.
So a lot of parents wrote to me and they said that they struggle with disciplining their children and they are unable to discipline their children without punishment. It's always a punishment and reward system, especially here in Asia. In the Philippines, Hong Kong, it's like if you finish your math homework, you will get, more iPad time. If you're able to get high grades, you will be able to go to Disneyland, or it's a reward and punishment system. How do you feel about that?
Well, you can incentivize your child when they become a little older. When you do this, then you can go play. I like to say when then rather than if
Yeah.
then. But also, the more you keep tying it to incentives and to punishment, the more your relationship will become transactional. right? You definitely don't want to punish your children because that'll just introduce shame and fear.
Okay.
So instead of punishment, I give a lot of other options in the book, The Parenting Map. But you can be creative. If your child, say, doesn't get a B grade, doesn't get an A grade or gets a B grade, don't punish your child because that just creates fear and shame and guilt. Instead, help motivate them, find out why they're not doing well, help them motivate themselves. You always want to try to link the behavior back to
Yeah.
themselves, not to the reward and punishment that you're giving them, right? It's called intrinsic motivation, not
Intrinsic. So
extrinsic motivation. You always want to go, okay, you got a B grade. How do you feel about it? And if the child is okay with it, you go, okay, that's great. I'm happy you're happy. You don't always have to push for an A grade. A grade is coming from our insecurity. B grades are just as well, fine as
yeah.
well. But we have been so conditioned to think only an A grade is okay that when the child gets a B grade, we make them feel bad about it.
I read somewhere that you actually don't allow your daughter to see her grades. Is that true? Or like you don't box?
Well, when she was very
Yeah.
young in elementary school, I did not show her the grades because it really doesn't
Yeah.
matter. At that age, when you begin to link in the learning to the grade, you actually prohibit the free learning. So when she was very young, I did not show her the grades because it was not important. But as she grew older, then she got to see it and she stopped showing it to me. And that's okay too, because you don't want to link the grades to your love, to your approval, to your validation. You want to separate their performance from your validation. If you begin to link your validation to how they're
Yeah.
doing, then they're going to live in anxiety and they are not going to feel like you validate them no matter what. They're going to know that you're validating them based on a performance measure. And that doesn't feel like true love.
So what I often see here is when kids have tantrums, for example, or are not in a good mood, parents can't stand that and immediately want them to either stop crying, stop feeling angry, stop having this like unregulated unregulated sense of emotion because it's in a public place, doesn't look good on them, they can't handle this. What tip would you give to a parent to try to cope with that? And what would you say to a parent who feels uncomfortable when their child is not at the right behavior, so to speak?
Well, I think that when our children are not performing as we want them to perform, we need to check in with ourselves, realize that it's making us feel lesser than, and separate our projection from their behavior. And then the second thing is to realize that children don't perform well because of one of three reasons. Either they don't have the skills, or they don't have enough practice, or they don't have enough self worth. Children are so young, their brains are not developed, so they don't have the skills to regulate. They don't have the practice because they haven't lived long enough. So we need to understand that what we think is bad behavior may actually be exactly the only thing the child can do. So when you are raising your children, you have to realize you're not raising a puppet. You're not raising a machine. You're raising a human being who has come into this world to want to be free and to be autonomous. And we think they should just be
Yeah.
successful, especially in Asia. And we need to eliminate that way of being because we're just going to raise generations of robots.
So the last question I would probably have is, how does one person start to become a conscious parent if you have a partner who doesn't have the same beliefs? And I read it on the book, your answer,
Yeah,
but you
so
can
that's
say it, please.
Yeah, it's very common, and it's impossible almost to get the same philosophy in both partners because conscious parenting is a new philosophy. So I don't blame partners who are not on the same page, but I really encourage whoever is inspired to change the way that they are parenting to start this journey, to read the book, The Parenting Map. It's full of details. It's so much information from my years as a clinical psychologist and a parent. And then when the other partner begins to see the positive changes, they can make a choice to either come on board or not. But I think just one parent doing this work will revolutionize the way they raise their children. And it is a pattern disruptor. It can change the way generations operate. So I really encourage you not to wait for your friends, your mother, or your partner to give you permission. This is the best thing you can do for your child, which is to become a conscious parent. So read the book, The
I
Parenting Map,
agree.
and you'll see it'll begin to change your entire perspective on parenting.
I absolutely love this book. I think my key takeaway is self-awareness, which a lot of people not necessarily are, and reading this book is your first step into self-awareness. So thank you so much, Dr. Shefali. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. I don't think you enjoyed as much as I did, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.